Well, hello and welcome to the Cory Doctorow podcast. I may sound a little odd this week. There's two reasons for that. One is I'm keeping my voice down because I'm actually at home, not at the office as I usually am on a Monday. That's because it turns out that it's Bank Holiday Monday here in the UK. This is literally a holiday more or less in honor of banks. It's the historic days on which the Bank of England closed and everything in the UK shuts down for the day. It's a little like the Canadian statutory holidays that are kind of not really in honor of anything except for you deserve a break. So it's Monday and the daycare's closed, the baby's asleep in her crib next door, and I'm going to read you as much of Someone Comes to Town, Someone Leaves Town before she wakes up. Got a suitcase open on the bed in front of me. I'm headed off to Minneapolis for the International Festival Reading tomorrow, and then to Toronto a few days later for the Harbourfront International or Harbourfront White Ontario Library Association White Pine event. I'm up for an award there, and I'm going to speak to 4,600 high school students about Little Brother and give them a little reading. So, about to hit the road, getting down to the wire on time, as you always do just before you leave for a week or two. The next time you hear from me will probably be in my parents' basement in Toronto. Um, some good news for Americans. RIP the Remix Manifesto. This is a documentary about copyright that's really good that did the festival circuit and was very, very highly regarded. I'm in it. Larry Lessig is in it. The protagonist is this wonderful remix artist named Girl Talk from Montreal. Anyway, this film is now available in the U.S. as a download on a pay what you'd like basis. It's not available outside of the U.S. on that basis, unfortunately. This is one of the weird things about film rights and distribution. It's just how it goes. Bad news for Europeans. You have 48 hours, more or less, to get in touch with your member of the European Parliament and tell them what you think of the EU telecoms package. This is a big monster piece of regulation that, as it stands, could give European internet service providers the power to censor your internet connection, to spy on you, to disconnect you if you're accused of copyright infringement, and so on. There is a set of amendments called the Citizens' Rights Amendments. If you go to boingboing.net, it's there on the front page as I speak this, or you can Google Citizens Amendments Telecoms Package. Get in touch with your MEP. This is really important. This is about the future of the European internet and whether or not it's going to turn into cable television, a tool for censorship, a tool for surveillance, or stay free and open the way that it has been to date. And the other bit of news that I'll give you, nice news to kind of cap off that slightly grim stuff, is that For the Win, the novel that's kind of loosely based on Anda's Game, is now over 75,000 words, and really, I think, in the home stretch. And I went through a period where I hated it every day, and I'm not in that period anymore. I really am enjoying the book, and I think you will too. A couple of people have seen it to date and have really said nice things about it. So you'll have a look at it, well, I guess sometime in 2010, but maybe I'll set some excerpts up before then. Anyway, that's enough. On to Someone Comes to Town, Someone Leaves Town, my 2005 novel from Tor Books. Bradley was born with the future in his eyes. He emerged from the belly of their mother with bright brown eyes that did not roll aimlessly in the manner of babies, but rather sought out the corners of the cave where interesting things were happening, where movement was about to occur, where life was being lived. Before he developed the muscle strength and coordination necessary to crawl, he mimed crawling, seeing how it was that he would someday move. He was the easiest of all the babies to care for, easier even than Carlo, who had no new needs other than water and soil and cooing reassurance. Toilet training. As soon as he understood what was expected of him, they used the downstreammost bend of one of the underground rivers, Benny could be relied upon to begin tottering toward the spot in sufficient time to drop trow and do his business in just the right spot. Alan learned to pay attention when Bruce was reluctant to leave home for a walk during those days. The same premonition that made him perfectly toilet trained at home would have him in fretting sweats at the foreknowledge that he was destined to soil himself during their recreation. His nightmares ran twice, once just before bed in clairvoyant preview, and again in the depths of REM sleep. Alan learned to talk him down from these crises, to soothe the worry, and in the end it worked to everyone's advantage, diffusing the nightmares themselves when they came. He never forgot anything, never forgot to have Alan forge a signature on a permission form, never forgot to bring in the fossil he'd found for show and tell, never forgot his mittens in the cloakroom and came home with red, chapped hands. Once he started school, he started seeing to it that Alan never forgot anything, either. He did very well on quizzes and tests, and he never let the pitcher fake him out when he was at bat. After 4 years alone with the Golems, Alan couldn't have been more glad to have a brother to keep him company. Billy got big enough to walk, then big enough to pick mushrooms, then big enough to chase squirrels. He was big enough to play hide-and-go-seek with, big enough to play 20 questions with, big enough to horse around in the middle of the lake at the center of the mountain with. Alan left him alone during the days, in the company of their parents and the Golems, and went down the mountain to school, and when he got back, he'd take his kid brother out on the mountain face and teach him what he'd learned, even though he was only a little kid. They'd write letters together in the mud with a stick, and in the winter they'd try to spell out their names with steaming pea in the snow, laughing. "That's a fraction," Brad said, chalking 3/4 on a piece of slate by the side of one of the snowmelt streams that coursed down the springtime mountain. "That's right, 3/4, Alan said. He'd learned it that day in school, and had been about to show it to Billy, which meant that Brad had remembered him doing it, and now knew it. He took the chalk and drew his own 3/4. You had to do that, or Billy wouldn't be able to remember it in advance. Billy got down on his haunches. He was a dark kid, dark hair and eyes the color of chocolate, which he insatiably craved and begged for every morning when Alan left for school. "Bring me, bring me, bring me!" He found something. Alan leaned in and saw that it was a milkweed pod. "It's an egg," Bobby said. "No, it's a weed," Alan said. Bobby wasn't usually given to flights of fancy, but the shape of the pod was reminiscent of an egg. Billy clucked his tongue. "I know that. It's also an egg for a bug, living inside here. I can see it hatching next week." He closed his eyes. "It's orange. Pretty. We should come back and find it once it hatches." Alan hunkered down next to him. "There's a bug in here?" "Yeah, it's like a white worm, but in a week it will turn into an orange bug and chew its way out." He was about 3 then, which made Alan 7. "What if I chop down the plant?" he said. "Would the bug still hatch next week?" "You won't," Billy said. "I could, though." "Nope," Brad said. Alan reached for the plant, took it in his hand. The warm skin of the plant and the woody bowl of the pod would be so easy to uproot. But he didn't do it. That night, as he lay himself down to sleep, he couldn't remember why he hadn't. He couldn't sleep. He got up and looked out the front of the cave, at the countryside unrolling in the moonlight and the far lights of the town. He went back inside and looked in on Benji. He was sleeping, his face smooth and his lips pouted. He rolled over and opened his eyes, regarding Alan without surprise. "Told you so," he said. Alan had an awkward relationship with the people in town. Unaccompanied little boys in the grocery store, at the Gap, in the library, and in the toy section of the Canadian Tire were suspect. Alan never horsed around, whatever that meant, but nevertheless he got more than his share of the hairy eyeball from the shopkeepers, even though he had money in his pocket and had been known to spend it on occasion. A lone boy of 5 or 6 or 7 was suspicious, but let him show up with the tiny hand of his dark little brother clasped in his, quietly explaining each item on the shelf to the solemn child, and everyone got an immediate attitude adjustment. Shopkeepers smiled and nodded. Shoppers mouthed "so cute" to each other. Moms with babies and snugglies bent to chuckle them under their chins. Store owners spontaneously gave them candy and laughed aloud at Brian's cries of "chocolate!" When Brian started school, he foresaw and avoided all trouble, and delighted his teachers with his precociousness. Alan ate lunch with him once he reached the 1st grade and started eating in the cafeteria with the rest of the non-kindergartners. Brad loved to play with Craig after he was born, patiently mounding soil and pebbles on his shore, watering him and patting him smooth, planting wild grasses on his slopes as he crept toward the mouth of the cave. Those days, before Darcy's arrival, were a long idyll of good food and play in the hot sun or the white snow, and brotherhood. Danny couldn't sneak up on Brad and kick him in the back of the head. He couldn't hide a rat in his pillow or piss on his toothbrush. Billy was never one to stand pat and eat shit just because Davy was handing it out. Sometimes he'd wind up and take a swing at Davy, seemingly out of the blue, knocking him down and then prying open his mouth to reveal the chocolate bar he'd nicked from under Brad's pillow or a comic book from under his shirt. He was only 2 years younger than Brad, but by the time they were both walking, Brad hulked over him and could lay him out with one wild haymaker of a punch. Billy came down from his high perch when Alan returned from burying Marcy, holding out his hands wordlessly. He hugged Alan hard, crushing the breath out of him. The arms felt good around his neck, so he stopped letting himself feel them. He pulled back stiffly and looked at Brian. "You could have told me," he said. Bram's face went expressionless and hard and cold. Telling people wasn't what he did, not for years. It hurt others, and it hurt him. It was the reason for his long, long silences. Alan knew that sometimes he couldn't tell what it was that he knew that others didn't. But he didn't care then. "You should have told me," he said. Bob took a step backward and squared up his chest, shoulders and his feet, leaning forward a little as into a wind. "You knew and you didn't tell me, and you didn't do anything, and as far as I'm concerned, you killed her and cut her up and buried her along with Daryl, you coward!" Adam knew he was crossing a line, and he didn't care. Brian leaned forward and jutted his chin out. Avram's hands were clawed with cold and caked with mud, and still echoing the feeling of frozen skin and frozen dirt, and balled up into fists they felt like stones. He didn't hit Barry. Instead, he retreated to his niche and retrieved the triangular piece of flint that he'd been churning into an arrowhead for school and a hammer stone, and set to work on it in the light of a flashlight. Well, I hear the baby stirring in her crib next door, so I'm going to start uploading this and then go change her nappy. Have a great week, and next time I talk to you, I'll probably be in Canada.